So I'm Steve Martell. I'm the VP of Creative Tech at Current Studios. We're a Halifax-based experience design company, and we have recently, as of last January, opened an office in New York City, where we have a small squad of folks. We primarily work with ad agencies and brands to come up with, that would have been awesome, come up with sort of connected experiences, we call them. So we're experts in computer vision, Unity, we build virtual reality, augmented reality. But we got in the game really early, so we started, we're going to kind of take you through a little bit about our background, and I'll apologize for being a little bit tired. I flew in yesterday morning, and of course you can't come to Toronto without staying out late, so I'm a little bit shaky, and it's not the coffee. Anyways, and Dennis, why don't you say hello?
Hi, can you hear me? Is this on? Testing. It's working?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Dennis Hubley, and I'm a developer with Current Studios. I've been with them for almost a year right now. I've got 20 years of experience creating digital media. Started with web pages and moved on up. My current passions are AR, VR, and binaural audio. And we just make really cool stuff at Current Studios.
Yeah. So we'll take you through some of the things, and we'll try to go back and forth. There's first half of this, maybe just a show of hands in the room to who we're talking about, so we don't maybe stay on some things for too long. This is a mix of since we're first, we thought we'd be hey, here's the nuts and bolts of AR and how it works, and then kind of accelerate quickly into present day and maybe a little bit beyond. So who in the room is a developer? Cool. An AR developers? Yeah, something like that? Okay. And marketing and advertising? And general hobbyists or people that are in the wrong place? Right. Cool. All right. So this is our outline today, some things that we're going to walk through. We have our 5-minute crash course, which is the thing I just alluded to. We're going to walk you through AR really quickly. We have the prehistoric period, which is not too long ago in AR terms, but and still active, actually. We still do a lot of prehistoric work. But just sort of going to explain it. The title of this presentation is Beyond the Printed Page. So the idea is often when we're brought augmented reality ideas, they're often the questions often involve around what is supposed to be on the image that we're tracking to, or what is the physical thing that we're tracking to. And we put that under prehistoric AR a lot of times. The dawn of awesome, it's sort of self-explanatory. Not really, but we'll get into that. Tips to craft immersive text. So this is where we talk about, we're going to show you some work, case studies, some of them not ours, and then also get into how do we do these things and what are the strategies we take to try to tell those stories and create that technology, and then jump into maybe what the future brings, and we'll try to leave some time for questions. So, our little 5-minute crash course, everyone, in terms of everyone in this room at least, this is our tool set primarily for augmented reality, and has been for the last 5 years. We have our optical camera on this, and it sees red, green, and blue. It doesn't offer us much more data than that. And our toolkits, no matter what you use, what brand you're using, they allow us to take that red, green, and blue image and look at it at grayscale to basically identify patterns and identify basically shapes, sizes, patterns, black and white mixtures, all that stuff in order to generate a signal or a response from the phone. This was just the stupidest one we could find. It's a Vuforia test of a kettle launching off a page. And to many people, that's what augmented reality has been for a very long time. So the prehistoric period, like I said earlier, this is something that we still do a lot of work in, and it's not meant to be hey, this is dinosaur work if you're doing it, but I wanted to just talk about it in terms of technology, or we want to just sort of jump through it. So we'll go back a little bit in time, and we're sitting here. This is 2009 AD. This was an SDK, pre-Snapchat, obviously. This is the times when it was iPhone 3GS, Nokia was still, and Ericsson were still phone manufacturers that people used. Motorola was in everyone's pockets. No one wanted to kill their flip phone quite yet, and we thought we were playing. This is Diffusion SDK. We're playing with a bunch of different AR APIs, but it's all desktop based at this time. So we're pretty limited, obviously. It looks archaic because it is archaic, even though we're not too far long ago.
Yeah, we're using the power of the PC here as opposed to a mobile, because obviously mobile didn't have the power at the time. And you'll notice there's a lot of jitter and shaking, and yeah, this is definitely the start, the shaky start.
If and there's no feature detection, it's just face detection, so it's really identifying a square based on your eyes, nose, and mouth, and the spaces. And then we advance. We jump a full year. 365 days later, we're in 2010, and we have, this was a job we did for Volvo, and maybe one of our first automotive jobs. Again, desktop-based. There's a DM arrived. Again, you would see millions of examples of this type of stuff, but the UI is really weird. I mean, why are we turning I don't know why we're turning the page to make the car move. It doesn't make any sense, and it's also turning it in reverse, but that's just what happens when you're not thinking about...
Well, it's like a steering wheel.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, anything. So, yeah, this is, again, real early, PC-based. I don't know if you want to add into...
No, I mean, you know, it's a high poly model for the time, but we're very much...
Yeah, this got a lot of oohs and ahs. Like when we would show this, this was like my first year at Current, and people would be like, no way. This is going to change the world.
And this is, of course, pre-Unity as well.
Yeah. And it didn't change the world at all. It died like that right after this, and then it came back, but we'll get into that. So 2011, this is where this is more fun stuff. So you can see we got a little like Pokemon Go info. I think they probably took it off us because clearly we're leading this. That's a joke. But we have this Unity-based, high poly models. This is something we did for Walmart, the launch of the first Avengers movie. This is Iron Man 3 at Tesco, sorry. We did 12 of these applications, and they were called Retailtainment. And they were the bread and butter of our entire company for a very long time. So all you did is you went to Walmart, you downloaded an app when you were there, and then you walked around the store trying to find characters who were always in the same place, in different, same places in apparel, electronics, produce, etc. You unlock characters, you can get your picture taken with them at full size, and then you can play a game with them at home. The first Avengers app, we were told it would fail, and we actually thought it might too. And we had 450,000 downloads in 4 weeks, and we had 1.7 million in social shares, and all sorts of crazy stuff that was like, oh my God, we've come on to something huge. We could probably retire before we're 35, and we didn't. We're still here working because it died really, really fast, sort of blew up.
Really, and this is like the beginning of mobile AR. This is where phones were finally powerful enough to do the detection. And we had the tool sets, Vuforia and Unity 3D worked very well together.
And then we jump into Dawn of Awesome, and the Dawn of Awesome is not really that awesome because, like this quote says, the dawn of mankind was pretty awesome event on Earth, but the world's newest species beyond the flash of fire was pretty useless for quite some time. So it's sort of like AR. We reached this point where we had mobile and we were able to do lots of stuff, but there was really not a lot of utility. I mean, it was still we were helping agencies pitch the one creative idea that was innovative that no one bought, but allowed the brand, their client, to feel better about buying the print ad. And this is a piece of work we did with JWT here in Toronto, actually. So the real case study here was the only way to improve on a Mazda 3 is with a new Mazda 3. So with just that, we thought, well, maybe we could do something that's a little bit more engaging than sort of trigger tracking, brochure, 3D car model, Volvo stuff. And we thought, what if you could see it in your driveway? And obviously the creative team at JWT thought that was cool, and they ran with it a ton. And then we had the foolish requirement of trying to actually do that. So that's where I always get in trouble, is I'm more than happy to dream with everybody and then commit to those dreams without any ability to execute.
And then he tells us developers to do it. Yeah, so this particular thing was neat because up until now, AR was just trackers on a flat page, and of course you can't just put a little tracker in the middle of your driveway and expect a full-size car to come of it because, well, the phones back then didn't have great cameras, and they still don't have great cameras. So the trick with this one is we actually used 3D object tracking instead of just pattern tracking. So we actually tracked on to the rear wheel of the car. So once it saw that rear wheel, it knew it was a Mazda, it knew where it was, and it was able to superimpose the new Mazda on top of your own car.
and you could physically walk around the vehicle, so you didn't need to stay looking at what you didn't know as a user you were looking at the back tire. That was the
point
smoke
cloud.
and mirrors. Yeah, we just had you line up the vehicle, and then you could walk around the whole thing and explore it, which was kind of, again, at the time, it was pretty cool, pretty innovative. But again, this is not using much more than the camera on the phone. We got hired by Intel and this is actually Leo Burdett and Intel out of Chicago to come up with a prominent beacon presence at Best Buy. So at 52 Best Buys in the US, we thought we would try to, for the first time, do 3D object tracking. So 3D object tracking is something that sounds exactly like what it is, where you have a 3D object and you can track to it. It's not beyond the printed page 2.0. And this was using the Mateo toolkit, which has since been purchased by Apple and going to be a big part of, I'm sure, Apple's plans with its, I think, the next phone in the spring.
Yeah.
Although they're not telling much about it. So we have a model that we needed to create. We created this like the actual Mars mountain. This is a game where you basically have to race off Mars using augmented reality. But it all relied on the fact that the model was a CAD drawing and could not deviate from the CAD drawing. However, as sometimes is the case, the producer on our client side hired a fiberglass hand modeler in Texas to make 200 of these things, and every one of them were different. So our application didn't work at all. It was a complete... so you'll notice in the actual test, as I walk over here, there's this little trigger actually on the model. It says Intel Mars Rover Experience, and that served as our starting point because we needed to calibrate the device. But as you can see on the sort of left side of the screen, or the right side of the screen, there was once we got that, we were able to sort of start to map the mountain in order to allow the device to lose tracking or lose the trigger, the printed aspect, and explore the entire model. So you would race across all the contours and bumps and bounces of the mountain in hopes to escape Mars before it exploded. The other sort of weird thing about this is, although it seems kind of like doesn't look great, because the graphics are a little bit rough, but the biggest thing is that, again, at this point, this is only 2 years ago, and we were struggling on process power. We were melting devices. We moved, you notice the gentleman is controlling the game in the middle of the screen because the processor chip in this particular device is on the bottom left corner, and we were burning our fingers. So these are things we didn't share as part of the storytelling, and I'm sure that, I know there's another speaker later who talks about storytelling, but this was one of those things where it was cool, but it was hell.
And then we come to Snapchat. Snapchat moves us from the basic facial detection that we've had for years and goes into feature detection. So instead of just tracking, the face of the person, it's tracking the eyebrows, the corners of the mouth, whatnot. The typical Snapchat filter uses 72 points. They use an algorithm called the Viola-Jones algorithm. It's your basic facial detection algorithm that's been used in digital cameras for many, many years. And then they expanded on that. So what they do is they actually fed a computer thousands upon thousands of facial images, and they had people manually putting these points. So the computer got an average of what the average face looked like. The problem is the average face doesn't necessarily line up with, I don't have an average face, I know that. So what happens is we then take a look at the features in smaller parts to line those dots up, and then they were able to do incredible things like put lipstick on, or in this case, a fireman.
We get asked to do Snapchat type stuff all the time, and then we have to kind of always remind people that it costs them $150 million to buy Look3. And the technology, although brilliant and quick and easy to use, is not, outside of the Snapchat platform, is very difficult to implement quickly. And very difficult in the sense that we can do really great feature recognition and track 72 points on your face, but and so can all of our competitors. But getting it to the point of like this really amorphic sort of responsive design can be quite challenging, especially with the sort of throwaway aspect of these lenses. They seem disposable, so they seem cheap, but they're a solid investment. So there's like quick run through of all the things you may already know or may not, I guess, and we get into how do we implement those things? What are some of our tips to craft a creative technology and immersive technology? So choose your story, and this is my role in the company, and it's what I try to do all the time. This is a job we did with Saatchi here in Toronto a few years ago, pre-Mazda, and although not, it actually had a VR aspect to it, but we didn't call it that because no one really would have bought it at the time. The app is basic. I mean, it launches exactly what you see on this page, and showing that only so many times can be quite redundant. So when I was, at the time, my role was to open the office in New York, and basically they flew me to New York City, and with nobody, I just left me on the street corner and said, like, figure out how to open an office here and find clients to pay attention to this Halifax company. And luckily no one knows where Halifax is, and they all thought I had to be like, it's the end scene of World War Z. And they're like, no way, man, you live on a rock. And I said, pretty much. So, but I had to come up with some compelling stories to get our point across. And again, AR I would say, was kind of dead 2 years after this app was built. Then what we did, the picture on the left is called RAV4 is drawn by Creative Directors of America. It's an installation that used to be in my office. I would give people a black Sharpie and a white piece of paper, and I'd start the meeting and ask for who the most senior creative person in the room was, and I would have them draw an automobile of their choice. And I didn't provide them any direction other than that. And after, halfway through the presentation, I would hand them the iPad, when iPads were super cool. And they would take the iPad and they would reveal that they had actually drawn a 3D model. And it would blow people away. They would be like, are you kidding me? Like, I drew this vehicle? And then the brains would start and they go, no, it's just looking for wheels. Or it's just looking for the windshield. And the truth is, you could have done anything. You could have drawn a circle, you could have drawn a square, you could have used the newspaper. It was user-defined tracking, and all we were doing was looking for patterns, just general patterns and general contrast on a page. In 350 demonstrations, one person deviated from that ask. And it's a solid sort of, we see it with kids in user experience. We do a lot of child games and stuff, and they're perfect sort of how to tell stories and get people to use technology. Is all these well-informed people could have done anything to challenge the norm, but the first time we get someone to do something, they almost always do exactly as they're told, if you don't give them an option to do something else. So one option, do something. It's a pretty solid story to tell.
So another story we had, for instance, we made an AR birthday card. So you would take the birthday card, you'd open it up in front of your computer, it would use the computer camera, and a little cupcake would appear with a little candle on it, and it would say, blow out the candle. So the user would blow out the candle, and the candle would go out, and people were wondering, well, how do they do this,
Does anyone know how we did that before we answer it? What's up?
That's what a lot of people think. Whenever you go blow out a candle, you always lean in. So we're just tracking the face and seeing if it got larger. And that would blow. And
basically every cool thing we show you has a stupid thing like that to be like, and you're like, awesome. Yeah. Oh. You're tracking a Mazda? No, we're tracking a tire. Oh. We did this. We did the first actual job we got in New York City was for the Intrepid Museum, and it was Intrepid Museum's on an aircraft carrier in the Hudson. And you go through it, and it's like you're in the aircraft carrier learning about all the wars that the United States fought in, and then you get onto the top deck, so you're 3 stories above the Earth, and you're walking across an aircraft carrier deck surrounded by the history of their aviation in the Air Force, and it's all very impressive, and you walk into a tent, and there's a spaceship, the Enterprise Space Shuttle. And it's the most underwhelming thing you've ever done in your life, because you've just walked through like the entire military's powerhouse to arrive with a shuttle in a tent. And it should be the most brilliant, beautiful thing you've ever seen. I mean, it's the only thing in New York that's gone to space. You can't touch it, you can't go inside it, so they said, can we get people to feel like they can touch it? Like, the size and scale has been lost at this point. The side of this damn thing holds 18 cabs or 2 NBA regulation basketball courts. So again, this was 3-4 years ago. You line up your phone to the side of the space shuttle based on the light and the contrast in the room. We just looked for white pixels versus dark pixels, and then we overlaid 18 cabs like the inside of the hull. But the spoiler alert is if you take the app home and you point it at like the screen, it will actually do the same thing based on the white and black pixels. That had nothing to do with the area we were. But no one's ever complained. They get like 36,000 downloads a summer, and it's one of the again, how you tell a story and how you deliver the story in terms of your user interface. Want me to open the video?
Yeah, you're supposed to
What did I miss?
back the.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, that's right.
Okay. You want to talk TD?
Yeah, let's talk TD. So, one of the projects we had to do was for TD. I don't know if anyone in here has actually, if this picture right here looks familiar to any of you. It was in universities across Canada. Basically, it was an application to teach budgeting. So we had people using a tablet, and they would use the tablet to look at this wall, and each of these items had a specific pricing on them. They had to hit a goal to win a prize. The interesting thing about this was we try to let the agency have a lot of control over what they want. The problem is there's a lot of items on this page that don't make good trackers at all. Again, we're just using the RGB camera. So you'll notice here this was like an early test. That brown book.
Terrible.
We can't see it. We can't tell the difference between that and that shirt, for instance. So you're not seeing a cube appear because it's not identifying it. So we would have to go back and forth with the agency and say, this shirt actually needs to have a design on it, or this paddle needs to have a painting on it so that we can actually identify it. In the end, it didn't seem like an augmented reality application at all. It just seemed seamless, like the tablet was identifying the product, and you could hit buy, and it was really popular.
The same sort of goes to this sort of user test on the right of the screen. It's for Chevy. We wanted people to be able to use the brochure like they used an like a touch screen. So we created a touchscreen brochure, which is sort of completely false because you still have to you still have to hold your phone while you touch the screen. Doesn't entirely make a lot of sense if you think about it, but it's those small little things. Like it's a user behavior people already know. I guess that's the point of the story. Is like, augmented reality in a windshield of a vehicle on like a Cadillac makes a lot of sense because you don't need to teach someone how to do it. We didn't need to teach people how to use the TD Bank My Spend, and we didn't really need to tell anybody what to do here because they were able to start to explore. MRI. So destroy definitions is the thing we try to do the most, and that's the whole point of this story so far. This app I'm about to show you won the best augmented reality, top augmented reality mobile app of 2015 at the AWE Awards in San Francisco, and it's going to not shock you, but it will surprise you.
When a child requires
A little bit, I hope.
MRI scan, it's unclear whether they will be able to remain still for long enough to complete a successful scan without sedation. General anesthetic has risks and drawbacks for the child, especially repeated general anesthetic. And if a child doesn't require anesthesia, their waiting time for an MRI can be greatly reduced. Currently, the assessment of GA is based on physician and technician judgment alone. Introducing Don't Stumble Tumble, a mobile game that children play at home prior to having their MRI scan. Using the device's camera, as well as motion recognition software, the game evaluates the child's ability to lie still for extended periods of time.
This should be in every vehicle.
This information is intended to reduce unnecessary general anesthetic, improve MRI efficiency, and to reduce the stress of the MRI experience on the child. The child's progress in gameplay statistics are tracked and displayed on an online dashboard. available for the physician and technicians to view and evaluate the need for general anesthetic. Don't Stumble Tumble is beginning clinical trials at the IWK Children's Hospital in Halifax, with a goal of decreasing the use of general anesthetic.
It's a really good thing. That's what the end says. So I'll just cut it off there. But the idea that if we started with that, and this was our leading the presentation, everyone here would just call us for BS, and you know, I wonder what this actually has to do with AR. But the point is that it's using the entire toolkit, the entire skill set of the company. It's using computer vision to track to see if there's movement. It's looking for a child's face. It's recognizing based on their face and the geometry where their shoulders and their body is. It's basically doing all the things, but in reverse. You know, we can track movement, like your Snapchat examples and our early monkey examples, and we can track context and color, like we saw with every other example, from a traditional AR perspective. So we thought, well, what if we could just define that in terms of trying to apply something, and instead of the dawn of awesome, where things are cool but maybe not that applicable, could we try to make these things actually come to life in some particular way?
Platforms. So it's still an early technology. It's been around for a long time, but we're just starting to hit mainstream. There's a lot of players in this space, and I mean, these are the most popular tools and partners and platforms that we deal with. Unity being, Unity calls itself the operating system of AR and VR, and rightfully so. If you want to get an AR or VR app out, Unity will get you there the fastest. Vuforia is actually the library that we use in Unity for all of the image tracking, object tracking, and user-defined tracking. Off to the right, HoloLens, Oculus, Vive, Facebook, these are all partners that are building the hardware for us to run our experiences on. There's new players arriving all the time. One player in particular is Magic Leap. I don't know how many of you have heard of Magic Leap, but you're going to hear about them if you haven't. They're about to unleash their technology to the public in the upcoming months. And basically, it's a new display technology. So we're starting to realize now that augmented reality does not necessarily always mean a telephone. With Magic Leap, apparently the technology beams the image directly onto your retina, so mimicking the way we actually see, reality. So this will be an interesting development.
We have an experience. You just get to see this first. It's an experience that's happening at Disney in Orlando on January 2nd, and it's using projection. This demo I'll show you for a video is using projections, but it's actually a 10 by 10 LED room with an LED floor, and we calculate your biometrics over the following in a minute of play. So 2 people stand in this room. They hold a ball that we fabricated that captures your pulse and helps us identify your BMI and your blood pressure. You play this game for a minute. The faster your pulse gets, the faster the game moves, and you're wearing a HoloLens just because. So that was just us adding nonsense to this, but it actually creates this far less cheesy-looking animation of every time you capture an orb, you're able to, here, I'll just play this while I'm talking. Every time you capture an orb, you're able to, it explodes in your face. So it comes across through the HoloLens. You don't get to see that, unfortunately. This is using our prototype balls. This is just our dev space. This is how we showed our client. We staged it in Hartford. And they just capture these balls. Each one has a different environment, and the ball in their hand, the thing they're holding in their hand, although it just looks like a steering wheel right now, that's the guts of it that we created. We didn't have time to make the mold for our demo, and every time you capture a ball, it actually responds in the same color on the LEDs. But yeah, they're hearing something different. They're getting coached, and
the HoloLens also is showing their biometrics, their personal stats that are private to them. So they're able to see that while onlookers aren't able to see their private stats. So that was another reason why we decided to go with HoloLens for that experience.
And we're running out of time, but the last 3 things we'll
rip through.
Yeah.
Moving forward, there's a talk. People use Siri and Cortana often enough nowadays, And that usage is only going to get more. So we're envisioning basically digital assistants. You know, you're sitting at your desk and you're like, "Hey, Cortana," instead of just talking to a voice, Cortana walks in and you tell her, you know, "Go tell Steve that it's time for lunch," and she'll walk out of the room, and Steve on his wearable will see her walk into the room. Another thing is, you know, Skype. It's a great business tool for talking face to face. But this presence thing is going to be really the next page turner, where you'll actually be able to sit in your living room with, you know, family members that are on the other side of the country.
Yeah, I mean, everything we've seen in the advancement of AR technology, VR technology, or even like the desktop, FaceTime, all that stuff, is the attempt to give us presence. It's probably the most powerful aspect of tech, and it's definitely the most powerful storytelling tool. 0 minutes. RGB plus depth. Real quickly, we can show you a video, but we don't have time. The idea when we started about this to be on the printed page is that we have only the optical camera on your phone to be able to tell us what's going on, and in order to give you an augmented reality experience. And obviously, things like Magic Leap being in your retinas, or things like HoloLens that are putting placement into a room. It does a really great job of mapping a room, and we didn't dive too much into that because I know there's some folks from HoloLens talking later today. But even in our office, the ability to map depth. When you walk into the room with the dev team, every one of the dev teams have a different head when you put on the HoloLens on. It's are you a dinosaur? There's a dinosaur, there's a cloud with a unicorn. Everybody has a different, everyone has a different head. So this idea of depth is using either multiple cameras depending on the device. So we'll probably see that maybe with Apple's new device. There's, or like Tango, where it's using infrared, or if everyone knows a Kinect. But the idea that you're able to measure things, see things, change backgrounds, do all the stuff that used to cost a ton of money to do, changes your life. All right. Oh, 10 minutes. All right, we're going to go backwards 3 slides and hold you here for longer. We won't. The last thing with the idea to know depth, we know faces, we know all these things. This is sort of our summary slide, but we'll leave you with one last thinking out of the box for augmented reality. We were asked to build an artificially intelligent acting judge for the Tribeca Film Festival. And you wonder, how is that augmented reality? But it was briefed that way. And we had to come up with an alternative means of presenting something, because we couldn't rely on everyone to have a device. So we took our learnings from the MRI example we gave you, and we reverse engineered in the sense that we tried to figure out ways to use people's hand gestures and their body movement and the world around them to
You don't think that I can tell a difference?
create an experience.
That's not showing.
Oh, this is the best part. Audio only makes this awkward.
It sure does.
Yeah. Thanks for the heads up, Dennis.
No problem. This was going to get really weird.
Yeah. We'll see in a second.
You don't think that I can tell a difference?
Oh, God. Oh, God. Ah! Yes! Yes!
Oh, yes! Oh, yes! Yes! Yes!
So everybody wants to be in movies, and you really allow them to be in movies.
Absolutely.
I see dead people.
Nobody puts baby.
Nobody puts baby in.
Somebody put me in a corner.
People reunion. No.
No, I am your father.
That's impossible.
By all means, move at a glacial pace. You know how that thrills me.
That is the highest score I've ever seen.
You can't handle the truth.
hear what's new and exciting this year at Tribeca.
Okay, I want to ask you about the Reactor.
Reactor, yeah.
Yes, what is
you
that?
can win tickets if you find the Reactor. It's the first automated acting judge.
So that was, again, it's sort of, you wouldn't call that AR in the sense that it's changing your reality around you, but it's using all the exact tools minus Vuforia. The thing's built in Unity. We're using face detection, OpenCV libraries. We're using depth sensing camera to discover your emotions. We're tracking your audio against, it's basically, if we were to do it in reverse or drop that into a virtual reality environment, we'd be able to create, it's the form factor that makes it present in that way, but you could be in a form factor where you're watching the world around you, and you could be in the movie scene, not really with these clips, but perhaps the coolest thing that was the result of this is because of depth. Yeah, we could track your face, and we could establish your, we basically mapped like you against the original actor's emotions, but Darth Vader is one of them, and he wears a mask, so if you made any facial expressions, it would fail you. So we had to make this dumber as it went. So it wasn't quite as smart. However, the idea being that you get to put yourself in the scene, see yourself in the scene, and again, what the form factor of that is sort of negligible. That's all for us today. Thank you for your time. I think the rest of the day will be pretty awesome. And do you have any questions? I think we have like 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. Look at that. What's up?
I'm just wondering in terms of like getting customers to download a new app.
Yeah.
Instead of having one app that's like augmented reality app, how do you download one for each different program or thing that you guys are doing? Museum they go to. Do you find that's hard?
Extremely hard. Yeah, it's so earlier in this sort of Dawn of Awesome, when we were showing all these, we did these 12 different Marvel apps, one for each movie. Sorry. We actually the reason it died is it ended up it was easy for repeat the question for the audience. Thank you. The question was, do you find it difficult to get consumers to download individual apps for augmented reality rather than just say a universal app for a museum that's like, I'm going to go to all museums and use AR, or maybe I'll extend the question to like, I'm Coca-Cola, I want to use the Coca-Cola app because it has, or TD Bank, I use the TD Bank app for a lot of stuff. Why do I need to have AR as a separate thing? And the two-part question. The first part I was answering is that it can be very difficult for people to download an app for a single use. However, if it's good, people will do a lot of things. We had an app that put your face on the cover of NBA 2K14. We wanted to integrate it into 2K14, the NBA EA Sport 2K's NBA game. They wouldn't let us. So, and NBA was paying for this. So we released an app that just said my NBA 2K cover, and all you did is replace your head on LeBron James's body, and we had 550,000 people download it in 6 weeks. Now, everyone used it once. Maybe, I think it was 1.8 times. So it's disposable. It also didn't cost very much money. However, in larger applications, it is possible to integrate a Unity experience into a native application. And we have a technology called Jive a script that we've written to sort of alleviate 2 to 3 weeks of work that's on the Unity store. Plug. And but the idea being we do that with a variety of different apps. I think the biggest thing though is the way people are using their application. You can chime in, Dennis, if you want. I'm kind of hogging the mic, but that's fine. It's what I do. The idea being that the exciting thing about Magic Leap, the exciting thing about any projections or HoloLens or different things like that is that we're expanding beyond just this mobile device, or we're changing the definition of what mobile device is. More questions? Over here.
How did we get into the MRI project?
Right.
And
we got into it over dinner with some doctors at the IWK Health Center. They were friends of ours in Halifax. It's a children's hospital in Halifax. It also, what's not on there is it went through clinical testing in Washington, and also went to test. There's a MRI manufacturer that is looking at it, and is probably going to just take it from us without money. But the product development is impossibly difficult when you're not built for product development. We're built for prototyping, rapid creation. you come up with an idea that's impossible to create, and we try to find a way to do it using pretty much all the existing tools that are on the market. We rarely develop new ones. We might modify things, or with AI, we're doing this a lot now, but again, Watson will outpace us, or some other third party will outpace us. So usually it's us makeshift duct tape versions of the code in order to make something work for the experience, and then someone else productizes it, and that could be related to us or not. So the MRI, we built that as a passion project. We brought it with the doctors. We brought it to the hospital because in the Canadian system, it was just about preventing the wait times with children, like preventing rescheduling. But the privacy around tracking a child's face, all these, it was just like riddled with stuff that we had no idea about. But we did things. We don't capture any of the data of the child's face. We don't have access to it. Only the doctor has access to the back end. The patient's by a number rather than a name. The number is associated with a health record. But again, to make that a real thing that is useful for doctors, you need digital data and health records and all sorts of stuff that is just now happening in North America. And then on the other side of it, that's why we went to the MRI manufacturer, because it was like, this is cool to train, but wouldn't it just be cooler to be sitting in the MRI and watching, and being able to determine the diagnosis right there. 0 minutes. So if you have more questions, you'll have to talk to us after. Oh, one more. Yeah, so our growth strategy in the New York City. So New York, the United States, 3 years ago, it was 0 of our revenue, and now it's 95% of our revenue. And the growth strategy there, because there's lots of competition, was be fast. So we have projects that we've screwed up, and they take longer than we expect. But 9 out of 10 projects we do under 6 weeks. 3 to 4 weeks is probably the average we get, and that's how we win. So we have 3 VR projects that we got briefed on this week that are due before Christmas on the 22nd. One of them is for Puma down in Times Square, and it's going to be so embarrassing when it fails. Well, I'll come here next year and talk about how terrible it was. No, I'm joking. That'll be good. But yeah, 4 to 6 weeks is the idea. We did the Reactor in 4.5 weeks. I think we could have used 6. We did Mazda in 6. We did Toyota in 8. We did MRI. Took a long time, but we only did it on Fridays. Yeah, I'm happy if anyone wants to know costs. All those things, like in terms of ballparks and whatever, it's not in terms of like let's talk about sales or anything, but I just mean in terms of context and scope. We're happy to share everything. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.